When I finished Sonic Frontiers in 2022, I dropped the game and never touched it again. It wasn't awful or anything, it wasn't great either, it just lacked replay value, especially for someone like me who enjoys doing literally everything one can possibly do in a game before actually beating it. I maxed all of Sonic's stats, unlocked all his skills, collected every memory token, saw all the cutscenes, and S-ranked every cyberspace level with all red rings. We were given a roadmap of upcoming updates, and that maybe could have enticed me to return occasionally over the months, but the only thing I was really interested in was the story DLC. It's been out for some time now, and I played through it the first couple days after release. No, I didn't just play it like a week ago. I originally wasn't going to discuss it, but then I thought, you know, maybe the few people who watched that Sonic Frontiers review I made would, for some reason, care to know what I think of the DLC. So, let's begin. I guess before I get into the story DLC, I'll quickly go through the lighter updates. Because I hadn't touched the game since I finished it back in November of 2022, I got hit with all the update notifications when I booted the game up. It's a shame I didn't record any of it. It was funny getting a pop-up over and over and wondering when it was going to end. Let's talk about quality of life changes. In my review, I had a minor complaint about the slot machine that showed up during Starfall events obstructing the player's view. Well, they added an option to toggle said slot machine so it's out of the way, which is nice. A much bigger complaint I had was upgrading Sonic's speed and ring count. Originally, you had to go up to the Elder Cocoa and hand over an unspecified amount of regular Cocoa. This was tedious because you couldn't just say, hey, I have enough Cocoa for 30 levels, give me 30 levels. No, you had to ask the Elder Cocoa to level you up by 1, then ask him again, then ask him again, then ask him again until you exhausted your Cocoa supply. It was slow. Now there's an option to spend all your Cocoa at once. It's definitely a step up, but I think it was a lazy decision. A player should have the ability to allocate however many Cocoa they wish to spend on speed and ring count. What if I'm at level 1 for both stats and have enough Cocoa for 58 levels and want to evenly distribute them so both end up at level 30? Well, the new options would only allow you to set one of the stats to level 59, so if you want to even out both, you'll have to obnoxiously upgrade them one level at a time till each one reaches 30. In the end, I still believe they should have had a UI element like this to set your levels. Those are really the only notable quality of life changes since I complained about their previous states in the past. I was pretty disappointed there wasn't some sort of boss rush mode to fight the first 3 Titan bosses again. They were honestly my favorite parts of the game. However, one of the updates brought a battle rush mode, where you fight certain enemies and then eventually the Titans. It's not exactly a boss rush, but hey, it's close enough. One of the more major additions to the game is the jukebox, which allows you to change whatever music is currently playing. So, if you're mentally ill, you can change the very peaceful music of Frontiers' Islands to something like 7 Rings in Hand from Sonic and the Secret Rings. You have a few tracks to start with, but if you want the rest, you have to collect music notes scattered across the Starfall Islands. Really, the only good thing that came out of the jukebox was Oranos Island's original theme. It's the best track in the game, but it still defaults to Chronos Island's music on Oranos after getting the 4th Emerald, so it's good we can finally change it back. Another notable addition in regards to collectibles are the special Cocoa added to each island. Collecting all of them per island will grant an additional meter to your boost. Unlike the music notes, you actually have to go through obstacle courses to get them. And I didn't really like that. That just meant there was more obnoxious floating junk permanently added to the world. I'd rant more about them, but I really only remember 2 from Chronos Island, as they were honestly quite frustrating to complete. Like this one for instance. This wouldn't be so bad if Sonic didn't behave in such a clunky manner when walking on walls. This challenge was just obnoxious because you had to carefully jump around this ridiculous cluster of blocks, press a button to spawn some rings, and when you collected those rings, it would open a pocket to another button that spawned more rings for some reason, then you had to launch yourself off these ramps. It was just all over the place. It took me like 5 attempts to ultimately figure out what the gimmick of this obstacle course was and actually get the special Cocoa. It just wasn't well designed, like I was playing a Mario Maker level or something. The last things they added were action chain challenges, where you run around and do a bunch of things to accrue points. It's dumb, but of course, I just had to get an S rank on all of them. To my surprise, doing so actually granted me the spin dash, which I was definitely not expecting. I thought it was stupid though, because we already had the drop dash and boost. What's the point of an additional movement option? Well, it's actually quite good. It's the closest thing we'll get to genuine momentum in Sonic Frontiers. If you're spin dashing on an incline with some significant leveling higher up, rather than continuing to stay on the ground, you actually get sent flying, and that's cool. I let out an audible whoa when I first pulled something like that off. This is a sign of progress, everyone. Sega is figuring things out. Maybe in 15 years, we'll finally get a good momentum-based 3D Sonic game. Okay, that's enough of the prior updates. On to the main event. Jumping through this ring at the start of Oranos Island will send you into what's essentially an alternate timeline, where Tails, Knuckles, and Amy look for the emeralds instead of Sonic. In the intro cutscene, Sage reverses what the three did to cure Sonic back on Rhea Island, and I just find the whole thing a bit silly. This implies mere minutes after Tails, Knuckles, and Amy sacrificed themselves for Sonic, they're brought back. I guess I shouldn't be looking so deep into it, but it just kind of bothered me. After the intro, we start the DLC playing as Amy. Now, Oranos Island is a huge mess in this timeline. It's packed with tons of floating, color-coded obstacle courses. You have the standard blackish-green platforms Sonic uses, but we also have pink ones for Amy, red ones for Knuckles, and yellow ones for Tails. Each character works a particular way, and their respective platforming challenges make use of their differing skills. So Knuckles can't do an Amy obstacle course, Tails can't do a Knuckles obstacle course, and so on. The corresponding colors immediately convey this to the player, and that's good, but man does it look weird. The default platforms in the base game already seemed out of place, but pink ones? In the base game, you really only did obstacle courses to collect memory tokens. We don't have those in the DLC, so a majority of the courses lead you to these Coco gyroscopes. Activating them reveals portions of the map, and they're specific to each character. So, if you were cool and managed to reach the end of a Tails obstacle course with Amy, you can't activate the gyroscope. Those reveal a majority of the map. The rest is unlocked through a few of those little challenges prevalent throughout the base game's islands. You know, like the laser jump rope minigame, the tile puzzle, the punching bag, and so on. The ones on this new Oranos Island, however, are made a little more challenging, I guess. Remember those speed challenges that required you to reach a glowing triangular goal under a time limit? Yeah, there's one that starts you off right in front of the goal, but you only have, I think, 5 seconds to reach it. That one's literally impossible unless you've leveled up your current character's speed stats somewhat. In the base game, there were a few of these tile strips where you had to dodge left and right to land on ones that glowed green. Land on enough green tiles before the timer runs out, and you completed the challenge. These were ridiculously easy. If it took you more than one try to do any of these, you're probably a game journalist. The new Oranos Island has one of these tile strips, and it is the worst of the DLC's mini-games. You see, the glowing green tiles are on a timer. If you don't land on them in time, they deactivate, and another one on the strip lights up. That's where the quote-unquote difficulty of the challenge comes from. If you took too long to reach one tile and it deactivates, you have to quickly move to wherever the new green tile is. In that scenario, you've wasted your time and are more likely to fail the challenge. The deactivation time on the tiles for this one particular challenge is ridiculously short. There were so many times a tile on one end would glow, I'd reach it, and the next one to land on would be the tile on the opposite end of the strip. You're screwed if that happens multiple times. It is impossible to go from the far left tile to the far right tile, and vice versa, before the following tile deactivates. You can spam the bumpers on your controller as fast as humanly possible, and you won't make it. Hell, Sonic himself wouldn't be able to do it if you gave him the controller. There is little to no room for error. I managed to beat it because I eventually got lucky on tile placements. Perhaps I shouldn't complain about it though, because with such an insultingly easy challenge, I guess there really is no way to make it genuinely challenging, other than just making it luck-based. Of the 3 new characters, Amy is definitely the best, and that's because of her movement options. She has a triple jump, can float, and also has a ground pound that launches her pretty high up. Such abilities make platforming a breeze. Hell, she's so good with platforming, I was capable of reaching areas only Tails and Knuckles could. On top of that, you can straight up skip some of her obstacle courses with the right moves. Okay, just got this one done. Let's get this one now. Oh, it's right there. How about I just... Hey, there we go, I got it. Something I never truly understood was Amy's use of those fortune-telling cards. It's such a weird aspect of her character that was never shown in any of her appearances, not even in Sonic CD, the first game to introduce her. I remember she had some kind of tarot card move in the Sonic Chronicles DS game, but I think that's the only time I ever saw fortune-telling cards mentioned in a Sonic game with Amy in it. I find it strange how they're heavily leaning on this aspect of her now. They're just plain cards, right? Why would Amy use them as an attack? Why would they give her the power to glide? How are they capable of forming a wheel that allows her to travel fast? Her hammer could have easily been used instead for all these moves, and it would have been more fitting. You'd think Tails would be a good character since he can fly, but that ability doesn't grant you much height. It's like they nerfed it so you couldn't cheat on obstacle courses. That being said, the best thing about Tails is the Cyclone boost. If you boost at max rings, Tails will summon the Cyclone mech he had in Adventure 2 and fly with it. This is overpowered. You can skip pretty much every one of Tails' obstacle courses using it. Just mark where the Coco gyroscope thing is on the map, Cyclone Boost over, then drop right onto it. It's the best movement in the game. Even with such a skill, I still prefer Amy because she's a more well-rounded character. Knuckles is unfortunately the worst of the three. The two things that distinguish him from the rest of the cast are his abilities to glide and climb, but they don't feel all that great to use. The gliding is stiff and slow. It's hard to control unless you just want to go in a straight line, which doesn't need much control to begin with. Climbing is pretty lame since you can only do it on these red walls. It's kind of buggy too. Like, I swear there were lots of times I latched onto a wall, only for Knuckles to slide off it as if he couldn't get a good grip. Pretty frustrating. In general, he's not very good for vertical movement, which makes sense. He's been that way since the 2D games. But man is it boring having to play by the rules and actually do his obstacle courses because he doesn't have any abilities you can exploit. You can eventually power up his glide so he doesn't lose height, but it's nowhere near as useful as Tails' Cyclone or Amy's multiple jumps. If you wanted to cheat the game and skip a Knuckles obstacle course, you'd have to find a high point, glide off it, then fall onto the end of the obstacle course you were looking to complete. But there aren't really any opportunities for that, and since his infinite glide was one of the last things I unlocked, I couldn't attempt to exploit it because I pretty much finished everything on Knuckles' side of the game already. All in all, it was fairly cool playing as characters other than Sonic, but they weren't all that great. Also, Tails, Amy, and ironically Knuckles don't seem very fit for combat. They have parries, melee attacks, and Tails has an infinite supply of wrenches to throw, but none of that seemed like enough, which is why I waited till I could play as Sonic again to fight all the Guardians. Speaking of Guardians, let's talk about them now. We have Caterpillar Plus, Spider Plus, Master Ninja Plus, Tank Plus, Paramount Plus, Silver Hammer Plus, and Ghost. Super original, I know. Ghost is the best mini-boss in the DLC. There's no plus at the end of its name, so you'd expect it to be like the base game version. But the fights are slightly more challenging in the sense that rings are stolen from you at a much faster rate, and reaching the totems you have to destroy is more involved. Overall, I think the Ghost fights were solid evolutions of their predecessors. Caterpillar Plus is like a hyper version of the base Caterpillar in its defensive state, hurling lasers and orbs at you non-stop. Of course, there is some delay between attacks so you can get a few hits in, but it's fairly brief. Master Ninja Plus is just a really sped up version of its counterpart. I believe it has some new attacks, but I couldn't really tell. Tank Plus is hands down the worst Guardian in the DLC. Instead of having the semi-interesting airborne sequence the original Tank had, we just get a basic, grounded fight where you have to avoid an endless barrage of projectiles. It also has this stupid laser that practically snaps to your position. If I ever died to this boss, it was because of that laser in combination with my dwindling patience. Silver Hammer Plus flies around and fires a bunch of exploding projectiles at you. With such behavior, you'd expect short, sparse openings to attack. I don't really know what to tell you though. The first time I tried fighting one, after hitting its head like 3 times, it immediately ran away from me, and this kept happening. I eventually said, this is a waste of time, I'll fight it later. However, every other time I fought Silver Hammer Plus, it seemingly bugged out on me. Once I started attacking, it just stood still and let me wail on it for the remainder of the battle. I thought as long as I kept spamming the attack button, he'd never move. Sure enough, that's how it played out every time I fought it after my first encounter. The original Spider Boss had you Psyloop its 4 legs so you'd get launched into the sky, where you'd have to go through a bunch of hoops that eventually shattered the armor on the spider's head. To shatter the armor on Spider Plus, you have to Psyloop enough of these drills it summons from the ground, which magically makes them shoot toward the weak point. They're not guaranteed to hit though, because the drills don't constantly stay locked on. While you're trying to activate these drills, you have to watch out for spikes that spawn whenever the spider stomps around, a ground pound that causes a shockwave of spikes, and these little heat-seeking spikes the spider occasionally launches. There are a lot of spikes in this fight. Oh, and Spider Plus also has a laser attack that I only just remembered. Anyway, those drills you Psyloop spawn randomly, which means they have a tendency to show up in undesirable spots. There were quite a few times I finally shattered the spider's armor, only for a drill to spawn right on its head, forcing me to get hit in an attempt to attack. I guess you could brush it off as a defense mechanism, but it's clearly just an annoying edge case that probably should have been programmed out of the spider's behavior. Other than that one annoyance, I actually kind of like Spider Plus. It feels like an original boss, unlike the other DLC Guardians. So, that's all the specifics for each Guardian. All of them, except Ghost, have one universal problem: too much health. These guys take forever to kill, even with a maxed out attack stat. It's the only reason I didn't care about exploiting Silver Hammer with that bug that kept him stationary. Sadly, there wasn't anything like that for Tanker Caterpillar, and they're the worst offenders since they give you so little time to freely attack. It's why the drills spawning right on top of Spider's weak point were annoying. By the time that Spike despawns naturally, Spider would have already regenerated its armor, so you have to take a hit to remove it quickly. It already has way too much health, why interrupt me when I finally have an opening to attack? Master Ninja was the fastest boss to kill in the DLC because it could be cheesed. I just let it hit me, then did the recovery smash skill whenever the button prompt showed up. It takes out like a seventh of its health, and doing that multiple times seemed to take it out faster than trying to traditionally fight it with some basic attacks. I'm sure people would say this is only an issue because I didn't fight the right way, spamming a bunch of combos. And maybe you're right, but Sonic's skills didn't seem to do much damage at all when I used them. So I just stuck with the standard punches and kicks to eventually trigger Phantom Rushes since those seem to do the most damage over time. I don't know, the Guardians are definitely more involved than those of the base game. They weren't awful, but if I weren't a completionist, I would not have fought every single one of them. The base game had these Starfall events that allowed you to earn purple coins for Big's fishing game. Collect these Mario Galaxy Star Bits to activate the slot machine and hope you get a good match. Starfall events return in the DLC, but instead of Star Bits, you pick up Cocoa as well as Seeds of Defense and Power. As you collect them, you'll rapidly earn more over time till the event ends. I got nearly 3,000 Cocoa on the first event occurrence, which is quite a lot. The base game had enough resources throughout the world to level up all 4 of Sonic's stats, but with the DLC introducing 3 more characters with those same stats, there definitely needed to be a way to gather tons of seeds and cocoa at a faster rate, and this updated Starfall event was the perfect answer to that. The only negative thing I'll say is speed is the only stat worth leveling up since, really, defense, attack, and ring count are for combat, and, like I said, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy aren't fit for that. I guess I should also mention you can't swap between characters whenever you want. There's a set structure to the DLC. You start off as Amy, then Knuckles, then Tails, then Sonic, and repeat that order once more. Amy gets to an emerald, but can't pick it up. It switches to Knuckles so he can destroy a thingy and get to another emerald. Finally, we get to Tails, who activates a thingy, which allows the others to pick up their emeralds, and Tails gets his own. So now you have 3 emeralds and play as Sonic. After that, we repeat the process for the next 3 emeralds. Only after reaching the end of the DLC can you switch between the characters a little more freely. Let's talk about the Sonic portions. After getting the first 3 emeralds, Sonic has to climb 4 towers similar to the ones from Rhea Island, but they're a little more challenging. I say that, but one tower in particular had me absolutely livid. I'm talking about the tower with those fans. First off, there's this one part where you grind on a circular rail and are expected to jump over to another just ahead of you. I am convinced this is not possible. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care if you show me gameplay of somebody making this jump. That player was clearly hacking, because it is impossible. Jump too early, undershoot it, jump too late, undershoot it, jump at seemingly the right time, undershoot it, boost, then immediately jump at any time, overshoot it. I could not reach this stupid rail. I eventually gave up trying to do it the right way and just boosted at the right time to send myself flying straight up so I could potentially land on a rail somewhere above me, effectively skipping that ridiculous portion of the course. I wish I could say it was smooth sailing from there, but it wasn't. The numerous fans that push Sonic here are terrible. They're way too inconsistent. You either get pushed the proper amount to reach the next object, or you don't, which completely catches you off guard, forcing you to panic and fall all the way down to the base of the tower. And that latter scenario happens like 70% of the time. When you're atop these towers, you have to complete some trial given to you by the aliens that piloted the 4 Titans. All it is fighting some souped up enemies from the base game with all your stats reset to level 1 and usually a majority of your skills disabled. For example, Tiger's Trial has you fight those hound-like robots from the original Oranos Island, but they pounce a lot faster. You can't do anything fancy to take them out easily with your restricted moveset, so you just have to pick them off one at a time with standard attacks. Now, that's one of the easy ones. This next one, oh my god, this next one, is garbage. Literally one of the worst parts of the DLC, hands down. In Snake's Trial, you have to kill 4 of those shield enemies. You know, the ones from Kronos Island. Your stats are set to level 1, your only skill is the Psyloop, the enemies have their animation sped up, they're fairly spread apart, and on top of all that, you only have 2 minutes to kill them. I wasn't counting, but this trial probably took me over 20 minutes to beat. It started out fine. I spent the first few attempts figuring out the most efficient way to kill them. Never get hit by their attack, that wastes time. Psylooping them to remove their shields wastes time too, so try to make the smallest possible circle when doing so. Don't spam the attack button too much because the shield comes back quickly, and you might inadvertently hit it, causing you to bounce off it, wasting more time in the process. I thought I finally got the hang of it, but I just wasn't able to finish off the final enemy in time. I clearly had to pick up the pace when fighting the others, but I couldn't figure out where to possibly shave time off. Eventually, I started getting frustrated. I was doing everything near perfectly. My Psyloops were consistently small and quick, I wasted no time running from one enemy to the next, and I made sure not to accidentally hit the enemy's shields. Clearly, I just had to get more hits in during my openings to attack, but I wasn't sure how. When you go in for an attack, Sonic homes in on the enemy. When he connects, there's a nice slow motion effect, then you can start punching and kicking. Sometimes I'd get lucky with maybe 4 hits after the homing attack, sometimes I'd get unlucky with only 2, but usually I'd get 3. Averaging 3 hits on top of the homing attack per opening is not enough. You'll realize that once you reach the last enemy with only 25 seconds left on the timer. I found out the issue was the homing attack. That slow motion effect produced by it? It's only relative. The timer doesn't slow down with it, and since the enemy's animations are sped up, that slowdown doesn't really affect it, so the shield returns to the enemy sooner than it technically should. This is where I started to notice how buggy the combat of this game really is. I found out if you spam the attack button fast enough just as Sonic is about to connect to the enemy, you can pretty consistently skip the slow motion effect and go straight to melee attacking. Without this stupid slowdown, you can get around 4 to 5 hits per opening. Now, you don't have to get it every single time. As long as you get it enough times, you'll have more room for error, and likely complete the challenge with several seconds to spare. Clearly, this bypassing of the slow motion effect is a bug, but that wasn't the only bugginess I encountered when attacking these shielded guys. Sometimes I'd be spamming the attack button to start punching after homing attacking, but for some reason, it'd do another homing attack, which led to more slowdown, wasting time. Sometimes, Sonic would get caught on the enemy's collider after homing attacking and slide off it like it were steep terrain, which wasted even more time. It's just so inconsistent, and that's the difficulty of this trial. Not genuine challenge, but fighting the combat's buggy behavior. I said Sonic Frontiers' combat was fine when I originally reviewed the game, but that's because there was nothing like this in the base game. Now, I don't believe these are new bugs. It's obvious they've been here since the game launched. This challenging trial was merely a stress test that exposed some minor flaws, and I truly mean minor. Bypassing the slowdown, the double homing attack, the awkward collision with the enemies, these bugs aren't a big deal if encountered in the base game. However, they're a huge deal if they greatly influence your performance in such a strict challenge. All in all, this was a terrible moment in the DLC. A lot of the gameplay you're seeing in this video is me running around the already completed world. I didn't really record any gameplay while I was progressing because I wasn't originally planning to make this video. That one tower with the fans? I completed it a second time for the sake of having footage. I did it for you guys. I put myself through hell again so you 3 people watching this could have visuals that correspond to the commentary. However, I did not do this for Snake's trial. I am so glad I actually saved a recording of my final attempts at it because I was not going to do that again. Let's talk about Crane's trial. It's the one atop the ridiculous fan tower. I thought, game, you put me through enough stress with that stupid tower and Snake's trial. I don't even want to know what you have in store for me now. Little did I know, it would be the easiest trial of the 4. Crane's trial puts you up against a Ninja Guardian. All your stats are set to level 1, but you have your whole arsenal of moves enabled. Like every other trial, the enemy is greatly sped up. You're also given a whopping 10 minutes to finish, so this single ninja has to be the absolute hardest enemy we've encountered thus far, right? No! I literally beat this trial in less than 30 seconds. Counterattacking with Recovery Smash obliterated this guy. By this point, I was honestly convinced Sega doesn't actually test their games. How can you have such drastic spikes and dips in difficulty like this so close together? After completing the trials and getting 3 more emeralds, Sonic has to climb 1 more tower to meet with Master King Coco. His trial has you fight all 3 titans one after the other, and that's cool. Again, they were the best part of the base game for me. Of course, this being a trial, there are a few catches to make the fights a little more challenging. Here, your rings are capped at 400 and you can't get any throughout the fights, which is terrifying because the Wyvern fight takes quite a while to beat. On top of that, they suddenly reduce your parry to a perfect parry. And I say reduce because now the parry is really hard to land. Now, I previously said the parry was way too easy to pull off. That's because there was no timing needed. You could just hold the buttons down indefinitely, and once something walked into you, you'd parry it. I said it could be a little more challenging, but after this, I retract my statement. You win, Sega. I concede. The perfect parry is ridiculous. It lasts like 1 frame. I could barely manage to land it. The timing of a parry is relative to whatever attack you're trying to block, and proper telegraphing of said attack aids in mastering the timing to an extent. That being said, Giganto does not telegraph his attacks well. For his standard attacks, he holds his arms back in preparation, then quickly swipes at the player, charging an attack for a long time, only for the actual damaging portion of the attack, you know, the part you have to parry, to last a few frames is, to me, not good telegraphing. It's like if I held a mousetrap on your finger and you had to pull away before I hit you. There's no timing involved there. The hammer of the mousetrap travels so fast, you just have to anticipate when I'm going to let go of it. Then there's Giganto's spinning move. Its problem isn't so much the telegraphing, but conveying when the hitbox is actually active. Because of the attack's nature, you expect there to be a circular zone of death surrounding Giganto the duration of the animation, but that's not how it is. The attack's hitbox only decides to activate when the animation is pretty much done. You can be directly in the line of fire where Giganto's arms are swinging and not get hit until the very end. It's quite jarring, honestly, and it's the sole reason it's hard parrying this particular attack when your parry lasts like 1 frame. My issues with the perfect parry end at Giganto, because before I even made it to the Wyvern, I got fed up and had to look up if there was a trick to mastering this parry. And there wasn't, but I found a way around it. The duration of the parry is tied to the difficulty the game is set to. I was playing on hard mode this whole time, so I just set it to easy. I didn't care, especially after suffering enough trying to time the hard mode parry. It wouldn't be so bad if you could actually tell when you're about to get hit. Even with the parry lasting longer, I was still having trouble finishing the challenge. The best I could do was reach the knight and survive a couple seconds before running out of rings. I was fighting Giganto and the Wyvern the same way I did in the base game, so I wasn't sure what to do. I ended up looking up a guide, and shout out to this guy for opening my eyes. Turns out side-looping the Titans to constrict them actually boosts damage dealt, and spamming the ground pound just completely demolishes them. All in all, it was cool revisiting the 3 Titans again, since there wasn't a way to do it in the base game, but the low ring count and restriction on the parry kind of ruins the experience. You can't just fight them like you did before, you have to cheese them, which is kind of lame. Before I move on to the final part of the DLC, let's talk about a few other things. There are a number of character interactions in the DLC. We had stuff like this in the base game. Characters like Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Sage would be standing in random spots around the islands, Sonic would go up to them, and it would initiate a cutscene where they'd talk. We have many more here in the DLC, and they're not super noteworthy, but I did feel like mentioning a few of them. One particular interaction between Sonic and Sage explained that all the floating garbage littered throughout the islands is only perceivable to Sonic, as it's actually remnants of his memories. I'm happy they explained that, because I was under the assumption the Chaos-like aliens made all these random obstacle courses. That idea already made no sense since they could only be completed by a hedgehog that runs fast, and some of them had Eggman bumpers on them. One cutscene also explained how Big in that fishing minigame isn't actually Big, but a memory of him. Not a huge deal, but I guess a memory of Big is better than him actually being in the game. There's one cutscene where Sonic and Tails discuss why the key to erupting the volcano in Chaos Island was a game of pinball. Tails gets all profound and explains how exactly the pinball game worked, and I just find it funny how they felt the need to give us an explanation. Yeah, the fact that an ancient alien race made the key to triggering a volcanic eruption a pinball game is pretty ridiculous, but that could have been brushed off as one of those video game oddities no one really questions, like how Castlevania characters constantly break candles to get items out of them, or how Xenoblade characters feel the need to scream the name of every attack they execute. I guess since Sonic was fully aware he was playing pinball in the base game, that self-awareness kind of warranted an eventual explanation of the minigame's presence. But I don't know. There's also a cutscene where Sage tells Knuckles to leave the fighting to Sonic, which is funny since that's basically Sega adding an in-universe admission Sonic is really the only character designed for combat. I was pretty disappointed to see cyberspace portals on this new Oranos island. They were just going to be more boring, linear boost levels, I thought, but I was surprised to see they were actually more involved. In the base game, red rings were the only special collectibles you could find in the cyberspace levels. These new ones have silver moon rings, number rings, and animals you can save. When you collect a moon ring, you have a limited amount of time to get the rest before they disappear, and that time limit is scary as hell. These things always filled me with dread when I reached them in these levels. There was one cyberspace level that scattered moon rings across a bunch of tiny, floating boxes. If you fell, you could not get back up and would have to restart the level. Precision platforming is not this game's strong suit, especially since Sonic's control still sucks here, and the camera is way too zoomed out, making it hard to gauge where exactly Sonic is going to land. I managed to get this particular set of moon rings on my first try, but once I did, I played through the rest of the level as slowly and carefully as possible. I didn't even attempt to get the number rings or animals, because that meant risking having to get those moon rings again. I think that's the sweatiest my palms ever got during the DLC. Number rings have to be collected in descending order, starting from 5 and ending at 1. This is the easiest collectible to get. 2 or 3 animals are scattered across the levels, and you have to pick them up and carefully carry them to drop-off zones. My only issue with these animals is they're sometimes a bit too hidden, and it's not because the developers went out of their way to hide them, they just don't stand out much and are a little difficult to spot as a result. Aside from those collectibles, these levels have distinct gimmicks as well. A couple of them have you race against a fake Tails, some have these green vials that temporarily give Sonic an invincible boost when touched, some have hidden goals to find, there's a level that keeps a bomb above your head and you have to reach the goal before it detonates. It's good stuff. The only truly bad gimmick is the one from level 4G, where the boost mechanic was replaced by this weird speedometer thing that required you to hold the boost button down long enough to eventually increase your overall speed. It was just really lame and didn't add much to the level. These new levels utilize branching paths a lot more compared to the base game, and it makes sense, what with the new collectibles and hidden goals. These levels are just so much more replayable than their predecessors. That being said, when you eventually complete all objectives and finish the levels with S ranks, there's no reason to ever revisit them. But it's quite challenging, if not impossible, to do everything in these levels in one go. You'll be playing through them at least a couple times to complete every objective, and I like that. One thing I will mention is the spin dash is borderline required here. The first level I played had me racing against Tails, and I spent quite a bit of time trying to beat him. I cut every corner I could, maximized the time spent boosting, and I could only just barely lose to Tails by like a second. I really didn't understand what I was doing wrong, so I looked it up. This Sonic Overtime guy had uploaded a video completing every cyberspace level including their objectives, and in it, he made heavy use of the spin dash. That's when I realized it's actually a good mechanic and not just another useless form of movement like the drop dash. Seriously, this thing takes you to heights you wouldn't even dream of, like the top of this loop. The spin dash is the ultimate form of movement. It's even better than the boost. Take a look at this. I tried boosting off the ramp and couldn't even make it to the platform you're expected to reach. With the spin dash, however, I nearly skipped that entire segment. The spin dash is just too good. Here's another clip. That's just crazy. I finished the level in less than 25 seconds. No way you could have reached that hidden goal with the boost alone. Overall, I think these new cyberspace levels are better than the old ones. Are they amazing? No, not really. I wasn't having too much fun with them because I honestly just wanted the DLC to be over by the time I started them. Plus, they're still just boost levels, but I have to give credit where credit is due. I think if Sega ever went rogue and decided to release a spiritual successor to Sonic Forces, they could at least make their levels like these new ones. The music they added in the DLC is pretty good. I wasn't having that great a time while I was playing, and at some point I whispered to myself, "Man, this is lame. Music's pretty good though," and I instantly smacked my mouth. I was shocked. I couldn't believe I organically said the thing everyone on the internet spews anytime the quality of a Sonic game is being discussed. Game bad, music good though. Jokes aside, the music is generally good. I like the themes they gave each of the characters. The new cyberspace music is pretty forgettable though, but that was the case with the base game too. The only cyberspace track I somewhat remember is the one from the beginning of the game. The only track I'm not the biggest fan of is the new Oranos Island theme. All it is the original track with some superimposed beats, but I think that addition kind of ruins the somber, serious tone the original had. The Guardians all have updated tracks too. Spider Plus's theme in particular starts out like a fast-paced version of the grounded phase of the original Spider fight, but then this part plays. You ever hear a couple seconds of a music track and just know the rest is going to sound great? That's what happened here. It's hard to explain, but this track just exudes a certain feeling that's hard to put in one word. Sonic and the player are in a familiar endgame, but something's different this time. Something's wrong, and Sonic needs to fix it. This track is the epitome of that sentiment. It's just so good. The whole track is great, but that particular part is just amazing. Probably the best piece of music in the DLC. Once you've beaten Master King Coco's trial, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Eggman hand over the emeralds they got, and you fight Supreme. The fight is exactly the same as it is in the base game, so there's nothing to say about it. However, after that, instead of going up to space to fight the End, great name by the way, it comes down and attaches itself to the Titan through a tube. Why does the End even have a tube? How does it even have a tube? Is it just that powerful of a being that it can materialize whatever it needs to hook itself up to the Titan? Hell, maybe the End is what made that hole in Supreme's neck magically show up after the first fight. Again, it's just one of those video game oddities you shouldn't question. The End takes control of the Titan, these extra arms come out of the exhaust ports, quite grotesquely I might add, and the true final fight begins. Well, not really. You're able to control Sonic, but there's nothing you can do other than get hit by these orbs the Titan shoots out. After that, we get this cutscene of Sonic controlling his cyber corruption and essentially converting it into extra power. It turns his eyes blue. Clearly, it's a powered-up Super Sonic, and clearly, it's a big deal. Master King Coco's trial has awakened Super Sonic's hidden power. Parry has powered up to become Perfect Parry, which can reflect any attack. Perfect Parry requires exact timing. Go forth and unleash Super Sonic's new power. This fight kinda sucks. You all already know I don't like the frame perfect parry, so you'd assume it was the heart of the fight's problems. However, I believe this was a much better fight to showcase the perfect parry. If Master King Coco's trial didn't have it and Sega only introduced it in this final fight, I'd probably still get mad and say the perfect parry sucks, but I would have gotten used to it much faster. This is because you're mainly parrying those orbs the End throws at you. Projectiles in general are much easier to parry compared to poorly animated melee attacks. With hitboxes that match their models pretty accurately and their predictable paths, projectiles are just easier to confidently anticipate. Simply following them with your eyes is enough to tell you when to parry. If the perfect parry were only used for this final boss, I think Sega could have tutorialized it to some extent. Picture this. After Sonic powers up, the End throws a single orb. It gets closer, Sonic raises his hand in preparation to smack it away, and just as it's about to collide with him, everything slows down like a QuickTime event, but comes to a complete stop. As this happens, the camera zooms out just enough so that it matches how far it is from Sonic during actual gameplay. Then a button prompt for the parry shows up on screen. I think this would have been a good way to tutorialize the perfect parry. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of tutorialization that intrudes on gameplay, but if you're making a really late change to a mechanic players were already used to, I think a tutorial like I described would give players a proper feel for how precise their timing should be, more so than just telling them it requires exact timing. All in all, the perfect parry isn't a big deal here. The fight has enough problems as it is. For example, the camera. It would snap to a particular angle that forced it into the trees surrounding the boss, obstructing my view. This was so annoying. I couldn't really see where Sonic was, making it hard to properly gauge how close the orbs were, causing me to screw up the perfect parry quite a bit. The camera would occasionally calm down, and I'd think I was finally able to play the game again, only for it to revert instantaneously. I didn't edit that clip. One frame, the game looked fine, then the next, the camera was in the trees. Who at Sega saw this and said it was fine? The next problem is the orbs themselves. They permanently reduce your ring count by 30 each time you're hit. It's not that big a deal if you maxed out your ring count, and if you're actually good with the perfect parry, it's a non-issue entirely. That being said, I was so bad at parrying on my first attempt, I actually failed the fight by losing all 999 of my rings. I get what they were going for. Some crazy attack that straight up drains a stat you assume to be permanent is pretty cool, but here it just felt annoying. It definitely didn't help that Tears of the Kingdom did the same thing in its final fight, but better. There, I was like, oh my god, I lost a heart. That's awesome, just like the beginning of the game. Here, I was just, huh? Where did my rings go? What? Those take away your rings? To be a little more objective, I think the biggest problem with the orbs is that they still take away rings in that scripted sequence before Sonic powers up. You know, the part where you're forced to get hit multiple times. I believe you only lose 120 rings, which isn't really much, but how many you lose is not the issue. It's the fact that you lose any at all. The player should not suffer the consequences of something out of their control. I want to say there are exceptions to that, but this is definitely not one of them. Compare this with Metroid Fusion's final boss. When Samus is confronted with the Omega Metroid, who is impervious to her beams, a single swipe puts Samus at 1 health. The SAX comes in, reveals the Ice Beam is the key, gets hit, the player gets Samus to absorb the SAX, then the fight truly begins. It's pretty much the exact same sequence. Fight quote-unquote starts, player is forced to fail, cutscene plays, then the fight actually starts. The difference here is that collecting the large core X replenishes all of Samus's health. That's the right way to do scripted forced failure for a scenario like this. Although the Omega Metroid is a piss-easy boss anyone can effortlessly beat without getting hit, I still don't think it would have been fair to not give the player their health back. They really should have given Sonic the rings back after he powered up. I know it's a minor detail that doesn't affect the fight much at all, but I just don't like that it's there. Another problem is the End's health. It constantly replenishes. I'd try to outpace its healing by hitting it with something hard like Cross Slash, but it just couldn't be done. I eventually had to look up a video of someone else fighting the boss, and in the comments of one of these videos, a good Samaritan said to just dodge after hitting the Titan's head to lock onto the tube on its neck. Now, I felt kinda stupid when I read that, because when the cutscene played showing the End stick that tube into Supreme's neck, my immediate thought was, oh, I'm probably going to have to remove that somehow. However, once I got into the fight, I really only seemed to be able to target the head, and that combined with failing to parry the orbs and the stupid camera getting stuck in the trees made me forget about removing the tube pretty quickly. Really, I would have never thought to press the dodge button to reach the tube. The dodge mechanic in general is one of the most useless things in Sonic Frontiers. I never used it, except when I fought those grunts in Chaos and Oranos Island, where they'd shield themselves from the front, and the game specifically told you to press the dodge button to quickly attack from behind. That's it. With such underutilized functionality, why would I ever think to do it here? Anyway, when you knock the tube off the Titan, it sprays a bunch of cranberry juice everywhere and the boss no longer heals itself. So, the problem here isn't the health regenerating like I initially stated, it's the fact that removing the tube is not very straightforward. Once you get the End to 0 health, you have to Psyloop its gun out so Eggman can pick it up, then a second phase begins. Sage, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy create some barrier to protect themselves and Eggman, and I noticed at certain angles they each had a health bar, but I never actually saw how the boss could harm them. Nothing much seemed to change in this second phase. The only new thing was this weird, I guess, attack the Titan does where it flails its extra arms around. After it does this, you move Sonic up to these arms and have to parry, but it's not very obvious. When this first happened, I stood there like an idiot for a solid 5 seconds not knowing what the hell I was supposed to do, only progressing after wondering what would happen if I pressed the parry buttons. It just wasn't clear. Sonic wasn't actually getting hit, so why would the player assume they have to parry something they aren't being damaged by? Before I wrap up the fight, were there any positives? I guess the cinematics were cool. Blue-White Supersonic looking unfazed every time there was a close-up was cool too. Made us see how confident he was with his newfound power. Oh, and the boss music was better. I didn't really like the I'm Here track that played during the original Supreme fight. The vocalist is just too whiny in my opinion. In the second phase of this new final boss, we get a version with better vocals. Regardless, this boss is nothing compared to the Wyvern. That fight is still the best part of the entire game to me. So after you finish the End's second phase, Sonic launches Supreme into the air, hops into the gun, and Eggman fires him out of it. Sonic completely obliterates the Titan, then pierces the rock housing the End, destroying it as well. We get an ending similar to the base game, except Sage is here with Eggman since she didn't have to sacrifice herself like she originally did. I think that alone makes me want this DLC to be the canon ending for the game. We had that post-credit scene in the base game where Eggman somehow contacts Sage, leaving us on a cliffhanger, and I really don't see what would have come of that. To me, it insinuated Eggman had something nefarious planned, and Sage would be part of that, meaning she'd return in a later game. Sure, Sage was a decent character, but she just comes off as a one-off that should never be seen again, like Infinite. With this new ending just having her there and no ominous post-credit scene existing, one could just brush her off and act like she never existed. Unless Sega does something with cyberspace again, which I don't really think they would, I don't see any reason to bring Sage back, especially since she's a good guy by the end of the game. I don't think Eggman would ever be an antagonist again if he had what's essentially a daughter by his side to constantly talk him out of doing anything evil. When I reviewed Sonic Frontiers a while back, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Looking back, I believe I was a bit generous. Maybe the out of 10 scale is not a very good metric for rating games. I just think of it as a school grade. 70% and above is passing. I didn't think Sonic Frontiers was awful, but I didn't think it was amazing either, so I felt a 7 was a good rating. If every game I play is okay enough though, I'm stuck giving games 7s and above. 10 is perfect, which should be impossible to get, 9 is great, 8 is good, 7 is okay, and below that is a spectrum of bad. 1 through 6 is just avoid you throw games you don't like into without much thought. Maybe a 1 is atrocious, unplayable, and a 6 is passable but not good. But what's the difference between a game rated a 3 and one rated a 4? I guess I'm discussing this because I didn't really enjoy this DLC much. As I played through it, the thought of knocking my 7 out of 10 rating to a 6 crossed my mind numerous times. You might say that's not fair since it's DLC, and I'd agree. However, the problem is not the DLC. It's the fact that it accentuated issues I didn't fully notice in the base game. In my review, I said the combat was fine, but after fighting all those beefed up bosses and doing that one ridiculous challenge with those shielded enemies, the bugginess of the combat started to reveal itself. Same with the game's physics. I said Sonic controlled well in the open world, but many of the obstacle courses in the DLC made me want to retract that statement. The wall running starts to suck the moment they try to make it more than just going in one direction, precision platforming feels bad because the camera is too far away from Sonic to confidently gauge where he's going to land, and that one stupid tower with the fans, it just made the physics feel so inconsistent. The thing is, it never gets that ridiculous in the base game, so truly, I cannot and will not change my rating of Sonic Frontiers, even if I was too generous initially. The game's still okay, but its DLC does make it look worse. If I had to summarize this video's complaints as concisely as I could, I'd say the DLC is filled with things that were simply not properly tested, fleshed out, nor executed as well as they could have been. The new characters, the reused Guardian bosses, the obstacle courses, those trials, the new final boss. There was never a time when I interacted with these elements and thought, yeah, this is great, unless you count exploiting the game with Amy and Tails' skills to skip challenges. But those instances were only engaging because I was cheating. It's always engaging when you do something the developers seemingly weren't expecting you to do. At the end of the credits, it says we dedicate this game to all players who supported us. Thank you for playing. And that just made me so sad. I like to think, as incompetent as Sega tends to be, there are still some developers at the company that genuinely try their best when working on their projects. They're simply being held back by the company itself. I really do want to see a great 3D Sonic game one day, something that will truly impress. I hoped Sonic Frontiers would be that game, but it simply wasn't, and this story DLC was a painful reminder of that. Let's just hope Sega learns from their mistakes and uses that experience to develop a genuinely fun and engaging 3D Sonic game within our lifetime.